Hello,
Hi there, BookTube. It's Roz, the Scally Dandling About Books,
and Tilly
and,
from Tilly's Shelf.
and it's one of our discussing drama videos. And we're talking about a play called The Government Inspector by Gogol. And it's part of Tilly's kind of informal, multi-month Ukrainian authors and topics season. Is that fair?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, and having just made a video a couple of weeks ago about Gogol, sort of explaining how he's Ukrainian, but also not completely Ukrainian. It's a sort of a semi-fit, but he definitely he was born
Yeah.
and brought up in Ukraine, but sort of
Yeah.
moved to Russia and yeah,
Yes, given that
yeah.
he had Ukrainian parents, was born in Ukraine, went to school in Ukraine, grew up speaking Ukrainian and Russian,
Yes, but then decided to move
be
to
a Rush. Yeah,
and wanted to be, part of the Russian literary scene. So this play, it's a Russian play written with a Ukrainian background,
yeah,
and it's set
yeah,
in Russia.
yes, and that's sort of it. Part of the interest of the whole Ukrainian Russian history.
History, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, and well, what did we think of this play?
I was very entertaining. I'm in the advantageous position, actually. I think this is one of the few plays that we've read for discussing drama that I've actually seen as a play, like staged in performance.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yeah, I thought I had told you that before.
No.
Oh, well, anyway, I saw it on stage when I didn't know anything about it, probably about 4 or 5 years ago. And it was hilarious in performance, and I enjoyed it again. It's an entertaining read.
Yes, the plays that we've read that I've seen performed, well, obviously, like the Shakespeare plays that we've
Yeah, of
we've
course, yeah.
read together, and also The Importance of Being Earnest, which was a
Yes,
funny play, and oh, Charlie's Aunt from Brazil, Where the Nuts Come From.
yes, I
We
know,
read
I know. Yeah, I know the one.
so, which again was a funny, so fun. Yes, a couple of the things we've done that I've actually seen have been funny plays, but this one I have never seen performed. But reading it from cold, having never seen it performed and never seen any play by Gogol performed, yeah, I also found it genuinely a really funny play. Yeah.
Yeah. So should we say a
Um,
little tiny bit about what it's about, I
yes,
suppose? So it's
yes. And
set
when it
in
when
a
should we say when it was written first?
oh, well, I suppose if we have to do things according to that order, it was
I think you
written
should.
in 1835, and first performed, I believe, in that year. But it wasn't received perfectly well. Gogol didn't really agree with how the last scene was put on, and the last scene is fairly pivotal to the story of the play. So it received some criticism, and Gogol really didn't like getting any criticism, so he reworked it, rewrote parts of it to improve the sort of the momentum of the play, and added a lot of very thorough notes about what people should be doing in the last scene to make sure that they got it right. So it had revised editions. I think that was in 1842 that the next one came out.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, very, very much first half of the 19th century play. So that sort of sets it in, we're not talking a modern play here. But and yet it has quite a modern feel, I thought.
It does. I suppose the main theme of the play is sort of corruption and people wanting to sort of look out for themselves and believing the worst of each other in a way, I suppose. And seeing what they, that it's a real kind of, it's about sort of fake news and believing things at face value, or believing things without properly analysing the facts, I suppose,
Yeah.
is one of the kind of moments of the play. So all of those things make it sort of very relevant and
Yes.
now.
Yeah, you could definitely do a kind of modern dress production and set it in somewhere that's got a bit of a um, uh, anywhere that's notorious for being politically corrupt, or and it would hit the spot. So are
Absolutely.
you going to say a bit more about the story?
So it's set in a small provincial town, and all of the characters, the majority of the characters are people from that town, like the mayor, the judge, the warden of charities, and their various wives. And they, it's not a perfectly run town. And they hear news, they hear a rumor that there is going to be a government inspector who is going to be coming to the town and checking that everything's done correctly, and that, nobody's taking any bribes, and nobody's squandering any public money, and that everything is, top notch. So they get in a bit of a flap, and they start to panic and think, how are we going to make him think that everything's all right in the town? And they come up with some pretty entertaining suggestions, like we're going to make sure that all of the patients in the hospital are wearing clean nightcaps.
Yes. It doesn't matter about what's under the sheets, but the nightcap needs to be clean.
It's very much we need to make it look and hit. And then they find out that there is somebody staying at the inn who is a man from St. Petersburg. And the key point about this government inspector is that they think he's going to be turning up incognito. So there are two kind of comedy characters. Is it Bobchinsky and Dobchinsky? I think, who come running in, and they say, we found the inspector. It's this man from St. Petersburg who's been staying in the inn. So obviously everyone in the town then rushes to give this man a really warm welcome, and they're so worried about him thinking that things aren't quite right, that they then start to see whether he's amenable to bribery, if they can bribe him to give them a good report, because getting a good report for the village is incredibly important. Yes, and the plot unfolds from there. I don't know whether we say a bit more about the.
Well, I think that you find out really, really early in the play that he is not actually the government inspector. So I don't think it's a spoiler to say that, because that is, you find that really early on. They don't find it out, but you, the audience, do. So yeah. So
he's hungry, he's lost all his money gambling, he can't afford to continue his journey, and the innkeeper is threatening to report him.
And he's basically a dim toff. He's of a different class to all of them, which is why they think he might, they fall for the idea that, and he doesn't pretend to be the government inspector.
Oh, he absolutely doesn't. No. They think that he's playing some kind of long game where he's, pretending to be somebody else and, trying to trip them up. But actually, he does tell a few lies. He kind of exaggerates his position in society. He tells them about the wonderful balls that he hosts in St. Petersburg, and they just sort of take it all at face value. Absolutely.
Yeah, because they're like little provincial, big in their own town, but not beyond it. I know this at the beginning of the play, presumably in the revised version, Gogol writes little explanations of how certain characters should be played. That obviously he was obviously, like you say, disappointed with the initial performances of the play, and I think we both liked it. His description of the judge, Lyapkin Chapkin, the judge, and the description is, has read 5 or 6 books, therefore something of a free thinker. And that's the sort of, he's the intellectual because he's actually read a book. So
it's a very kind of small town mindset. And the supposed government inspector very quickly he doesn't understand why he's getting this treatment, but he quickly cottons on to the fact that the villagers are very hospitable to him, and he quickly kind of works out that they're willing to give him what he asks for. So there is a sort of a series of comedic encounters through the middle part of the play, where he kind of sees, if I ask this person to lend me however many rubles, are they going to do it? And just test the boundaries. They're like, okay, well, this person gave me 200, so I'll ask this person if they'll lend me 300. Just tries to work his way up there to get the funds to kind of continue his gambling journey further on. And he has a servant who's slightly more deceptive, opposite, who kind of works out, this is maybe a situation that we shouldn't take too much advantage of, and encourages him to sort of quit while he's ahead in a way.
Yeah. Get out before you're discovered.
They catch you out. Yeah.
Before they catch you out. Yes. And so it has funny characters. It's poking fun at these characters. I mean, it's not altogether kind about these provincials, is it?
Yes.
I mean, I think I guess it must be. I guess he was writing it for a sort of a metropolitan, like a St. Petersburg audience. If you were from the kind of little town that it describes and you were the mayor, it would be quite insulting, wouldn't it?
Yeah. And one of the criticisms that the play received was that it was sort of unpatriotic and that it was undermining of Russia. And interestingly, he then worked that into his future reworkings of it and extended the mayor's speech at one point to when the mayor's despairing of the disaster of it all. The mayor kind of says, and this is the kind of thing that they'll turn into a play and then everyone will be laughing at us, but what are you laughing at? And kind of like that turns on the audience in a way.
Yes. Oh, yes. There's a sudden breaking of the fourth wall, isn't there? Which I always enjoy in a play. He does. You sort of say, well, you will, yes. But, so there's some quite farcical bits. There's moments when, I don't know, like the one character, like Zoran falls into the room and, that sort of thing. And those kind of conversations where one person's saying something and the other person's misinterpret, they're kind of talking at cross purposes and those sorts of things, which are entertaining. But there's a sort of a political darkness. It's satire, there is dark,
there's a sort of a bitter undertone.
Bitter is the word.
It was a phase in Gogol's life when apparently he had decided that, getting this from the introduction to this Penguin Classics his work, but he'd sort of decided that his writing should serve a purpose, and he kind of wanted this play to sort of educate people and improve Russia at the same time as entertaining. And he was quite hurt by the fact that people either criticized the play or just viewed it as pure entertainment and didn't really see that it had a moral intent to it, and that people should have been learning from the stuff that he was writing. He was quite upset. I think we've mentioned that he didn't like criticism. I want to quickly read, if it'll open, I just want to quickly read what he wrote in a letter about this criticism, because he left Russia soon afterwards to go and live in Rome. And he said, "I'm going abroad, there to shake off the anguish that my fellow countrymen visit upon me daily." And that was their criticism of the play and their lack of understanding of what he was trying to achieve.
That's quite rash as a writer, isn't it? To put yourself out there by publishing, putting on plays or publishing novels or short, if you find it unbearable when people slightly misunderstand you or criticize, gosh,
I think he had a very, it sounds like he had a very sensitive character, and he really, as soon as he had quite an all or nothing approach. I think I suppose he wasn't as resilient as he just wasn't very resilient to criticism, and if he perceived a little bit of criticism, that often sort of led to him seeing it as a disaster and something that he couldn't cope with. But at the same time, he had a real drive to be a literary success, and that he saw that as his purpose was to be someone really significant. So kind of struggled with those two sides of himself, I suppose.
Probably a good job he didn't live in the age of the internet and
oh gosh, yes.
Twitter would have done for him.
But I suppose he might also have had other options available in terms of mental health support in the modern era. Anyway,
it's actually the first thing that I've read by him, and I've read like most of the what you might call the sort of the big 19th century Russian authors, yes. I've read, and he's the one that I haven't. I'm not sure why not, but I've avoided Gogol, but having read this, I'm now thinking, give me a novel,
Yeah.
And
Well,
you
I would
recommended.
recommend Dead Souls, and I think there's a similar aspect in Dead Souls and in the Government Inspector, in that there is this kind of this stranger who goes into a close-knit community and presents himself possibly as being other than he is, or is interpreted as being other than he is by the townsfolk, and uses that interpretation for his own gain, and is able to sort of manipulate the people around him, with much more finesse in the case of Dead Souls. That's a much more sort of advanced exploration of that theme, but this works in a simple sense for the nature of the play, I suppose.
Yeah. If I was going to make a criticism of the play, I think it would be that I didn't really attach to any of the characters. Do you know what I mean? I didn't feel, I feel like I ought to have felt perhaps anxious for the mayor, or that the mayor's daughter, we won't spoil the plot, but she has something quite bad happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I didn't kind of feel it. Do you know what I mean? It's not an emotional thing.
It's odd because you do feel a degree of sympathy for them, but you also slightly despise them because they don't behave in an upstanding way. And I suppose you don't get enough of their individual personalities because it's quite a big cast. You don't get enough to build that bond where you like them, even though they're not ideal. I would say my criticism would be his female characters were incredibly flimsy in this story. Although, like you said, the mayor's daughter, Maria, she goes through something quite difficult, but it's very superficially handled, I suppose. It's very much played for laughs, which makes sense for a fairly comedic play, but it lacked depth.
Yeah. I mean, all the characters are shallow, aren't they? In a sense, it's more of a sort of a clever setup.
Yes. Which he apparently borrowed from Pushkin, the setup of it. Pushkin gave him the idea for the play. It's not entirely clear whether Pushkin gave him the idea willingly or whether Gogol sort of took it. But he did well with it, so
Yeah. So, well, Pushkin should just have written his version quicker.
Exactly. Yeah. It only took Gogol a couple of months to write, apparently. So he obviously knew that he needed to get in there quickly.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But so definitely worth reading. Definitely made me feel like I would read more by him. Made me think I would like to read a novel where maybe I might get some extra layers or more nuance. We'll see. Or one thing that this edition of the play explains is that lots of the characters' names have like kind of double meanings. I know not so double, but like the name sort of it's a bit like Mr. Foxy, or
there's Mr. Onion, who is later criticised for smelling of onions, and things along that line.
And I thought it was interesting, but that you might be tempted. I would almost be tempted to have found
appropriate
in English translation, found English words that would work as names and have the same impact, because I felt like I was
that wordplay is quite important to
but it's a translation is a fine art, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's because on the other hand, it needs to feel very Russian, because that's what he was trying to do. But if I were doing if I was staging it now, and I try, I wanted to make it feel really, rather than a sort of historical, make it a modern, then I would change those names, and you could do a little corrupt small town in Britain easily, couldn't you?
And just bring forward the setting, and maybe you could scatter in a few references to Twitter if you wanted to, or give him a bit of a social media presence.
It could certainly be done. Probably has been done. I have to look out. I would love to see it live.
The production that I saw was by Ramps on the Moon, and that was very much, I think that was set at the time, or not very much in a not a full sort of 19th century dresses and things, but not modernized.
Yeah.
And that was at the West Yorkshire Playhouse, as it was then, which is now called the Leeds Playhouse.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's probably all I feel moved to say about this one. What about you?
Yeah, I think that's probably enough. So thank you
That's
very
good.
much for watching. Let us know your thoughts on Gogol generally, government inspector, plays about corruption, anything of that kind.
Should I read Dead Souls, or is there another
Yes,
recommendation? No, Tilly says I should.
Okay,
Bye.
goodbye.